It was a small machine. It weighed just over 10 pounds, could be carried with one hand, and operated with a hand crank. It had no electric motor, required no special room, needed no expensive setup. Anyone who knew how to use it could take it anywhere. That, in part, was what made it different from nearly everything that came before it. In December of 1895, that machine was ready to do something no other device had managed in any practical public way: project moving images onto a screen, in front of a group of people who had paid to watch. It wasn't the first time someone had filmed figures in motion, or the first time anyone had shown them in private. But it was the first time that experience was offered as a commercial event, open to the public, with a set program, a scheduled time, and a ticket price. What happened that afternoon in Paris wasn't a sudden revelation or an invention that appeared out of nowhere. It was the result of decades of experimentation, a family with deep ties to the photography industry, and a deliberate decision to bring a technology to the public before anyone else did. Throughout the 19th century, the question of how to capture movement in images had occupied photographers, scientists, and entrepreneurs across several countries. Before the Lumière introduced their cinematograph, other devices were already attempting to solve that problem, each in its own way, each with its own limitations. Thomas Edison and William Dixon's kinetoscope was one of the most well-known, a freestanding box with a peephole at the top, where a single viewer would lean in and watch a short loop of moving images. It worked. It drew crowds as a novelty. But it had a fundamental structural flaw. It could only be used by one person at a time. It was a private attraction, not a shared spectacle. Louis and Auguste Lumière were not starting from scratch. They came from a family that understood images. Their father, Antoine Lumière, had founded a company in Lyon that manufactured photographic plates, and the family business was one of the most significant in France in that field. Louis, the elder of the two brothers, had a strong inclination toward technical problems. When he began working on a device to record and project moving images, he did so from a foundation of accumulated knowledge: photographic materials, development processes, exposure timing. The cinematograph that Louis developed, with contributions from the wider family operation, solved in practical terms several problems that no other device had managed to address together. It could film, capturing a sequence of frames onto a strip of photographic film at a consistent speed. It could make copies of that footage, and it could project those images onto a screen, enlarged, so that many people could watch at the same time. All of that in a single lightweight portable machine that required no permanent installation. The internal mechanism that advanced the film one frame at a time with precision was one of the key innovations. A feed system that drew from the mechanical logic of the sewing machine, adapted for the specific demands of photographic film. By the end of 1895, the Lumière had already filmed several short scenes and had demonstrated their device in a few private showings. But the projection on December 28th of that year, at the Salon Indien of the Grand Café in Paris, was something different. It was public, it was paid, and it was organized as a full program with a proper audience. The basement of the café was not a theater or a performance venue. It was a rented room, with chairs arranged in front of a makeshift screen, admission priced at 1 franc, and an operator running the cinematograph in the dark. The session included several films, all very short, each under a minute. There were no complicated stories, no famous actors, no elaborate effects. What there was were scenes from the real world, filmed with a stationary camera. Workers leaving a factory, a garden, a town square, a shoreline. Ordinary images that, when set in motion and projected onto a white screen, became something entirely new. The first film in that program was known as Workers Leaving the Lumière Factory, filmed in Lyon. Hundreds of workers streamed out through the factory gates at the end of the workday, moving in different directions, some with bicycles, others in hats, women and men flowing naturally through the frame. It was an unremarkable scene. But what the audience was seeing was something no photograph had ever given them: time itself. The real movement of real people, captured and played back. The image wasn't a frozen representation of the world, it was the world in motion, held inside a screen. Also on the program that afternoon was arrival of a train at La Ciotat station. A locomotive approached the camera, growing larger in the frame until it pulled to a stop at the platform. It is the film from that program that people remember most often, though usually for reasons that blur history and legend together. For years, the story circulated that the audience, seeing the train bearing down on them, stood up in terror and rushed for the exits. It's a vivid and appealing anecdote, but the historical record doesn't hold it up. There was likely surprise, and some viewers may have felt a kind of vertigo as the perspective of the oncoming train filled the screen, but the idea of a room in full panic appears to be more of a later embellishment than a documented fact. What is true is that the film demonstrated something fundamental with unusual clarity: depth, movement directed at the viewer, the sensation of being inside an actual space. The program also included a short film called The Sprinkler Sprinkled. A gardener waters his garden while a boy steps on the hose behind him. The water stops. The gardener looks at the nozzle, puzzled. The boy lifts his foot, and the gardener gets soaked. It was a simple gag, but it was something different from the other films on the program. It was a small staged setup, a situation constructed to produce a specific reaction in the audience. It wasn't just reality being recorded, it was reality being arranged to create an effect. Many film historians point to this as one of the earliest signs that cinema could do more than document the world. It could build situations for the people watching it. The audience at that first screening was small. The basement of the Grand Café did not fill up with an overwhelming crowd. The admission was cheap, the room was modest, and the program ran for roughly 20 minutes. But word spread quickly. Within weeks, screenings multiplied, rooms filled up, and interest grew across Paris and into other cities. The Lumières understood that what they had was not just a technical invention, but an attraction with real commercial potential. What that audience was experiencing wasn't simply curiosity about a new technology. It was something harder to name, seeing images move in the same space they occupied, sharing that experience with others, recognizing on the screen the same world that existed outside. Photography had captured moments. The cinematograph captured time. And that difference fundamentally changed the relationship between the image and the person looking at it. The Lumière brothers quickly organized a network of trained operators to travel with the cinematograph. Those operators took the device to other French cities, then to European capitals, then to other parts of the world. And they didn't just show films made in Lyon, they filmed local scenes wherever they arrived. The cinematograph showed Buenos Aires, Cairo, Moscow, Tokyo. It showed markets, trains, beaches, ceremonies. Cinema was born as a machine for recording the world, before anyone fully understood what else it might be capable of. The initial business model was straightforward. The Lumière didn't sell their devices. They controlled the entire chain of production, duplication, and exhibition themselves. But that structure couldn't hold for long against the speed at which other inventors, entrepreneurs, and curious observers began grasping the possibilities of the invention. Within a few years, cinema would stop being a traveling show managed by a single company and become a sprawling, competitive, constantly expanding industry. The Lumière believed at some point that their invention had a limited future as a fairground attraction or scientific curiosity. They didn't anticipate what was coming. They didn't imagine narrative fiction, studios, movie stars, or the modern cinematic language. That doesn't make them less significant. In some ways, it makes them more interesting. They invented something whose reach far exceeded anything they could see from where they were standing. At the end of one of those early screenings, the operator switched off the cinematograph, wound the film back onto its reel, and packed up the equipment. The screen went white. People made their way out into the cold of the Parisian night. What they had just watched was simple. People walking, a train arriving, a man soaked by a garden hose. Images of a reality everyone already knew. But something had shifted in the way that reality could be looked at. It was no longer just the world. It was a world that could be captured, reproduced, and shown again. The same moment, repeated. The same factory afternoon, every time someone switched the machine back on.